Qualys has brought together vulnerability management and patch management, letting security teams discover vulnerabilities and apply patches immediately, all within a single, unified app. Sign up for a free trial of Qualys VMDR, vulnerability management, detection, and response today at securityweekly.com/Qualys. Elastic Security empowers security teams everywhere to prevent, detect, and respond to threats quickly through a unified solution. And it's free and open, putting you in control. Use Elastic Security to eliminate blind spots by analyzing all of your data, no matter its volume, format, or age. Stop threats at scale with automated threat and anomaly detection, and arm every analyst with fast search and integrated case management. Download or try Elastic SIEM for free and experience the benefits of an open security solution backed by world-class security research at securityweekly.com/elastic. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. I'd like to kindly ask our listeners, we're in the process of revamping our subscribe page. Really, we want to make you aware of three things. One, you can join our mailing list, learn about all the webcasts, virtual trainings. Two, you can join our Discord channel. We're going to put an invite on the subscribe page as well. And we want you to know about our other shows that we have on the network. Doug hosts Security Weekly News, News Weekly, and Jeff hosts Security and Compliance Weekly. And we have lots of other shows on the network, application security, and a whole bunch of others. You can find it all on securityweekly.com/subscribe. So please go do that. Also, we've got a webcast coming up. Todd Beardsley basically, does a lot of things. One of the things he does is scan the internet as a whole and produces a report. And get this, you can go read the report for free. Right. You don't have to register or anything. You can just go access the report. We've got a webcast on August 13th with Todd to live in-person talk to Todd about those results. The audience will be able to ask questions. So if you want to hear myself, Matt Alderman, and Todd Beardsley talk about basically what's hanging open on the internet and trends that have changed or not changed over time, go to securityweekly.com/webcast and access our on-demand library on/on-demand. We've got some news articles to talk about this week.
Before you jump into the news, I have to tell you, 18, 19 years ago, I was at a conference with Ron Gula, and Bill Cheswick was there, and one of the hobbies that he had back then was plotting the internet.
Oh, I've seen those
the
images.
3 by 5 foot.
Todd has plot. One of those. It was his background on Zoom. Based on domains and it was I'm less impressed now because IPv4 space has been exhausted.
It's static.
Todd will address the V4 versus V6 and how that has presented itself in the data. He's certainly not ignoring V6. But we'll address it.
Can't ignore V6. Yeah, can't ignore V. But
we can ignore Joff.
The reality's just in front of us, right? That's all I was saying. And it's like, come on, people. Embrace, love, move on. Anyway.
Most of us had the Twitter article in some way, shape, form, or fashion. My whole thing was
hard to miss it.
I mean, if you read the articles, right, like it's a total boilerplate, right? Twitter comes out and says, we've implemented safeguards to improve the security of our internal systems and are working with law enforcement as they conduct investigations. We understand it's our responsibility and are committed to earning the trust of all of our stakeholders with our every action, including how we address security issues. We will continue to be transparent in sharing our learnings and remediations. Well, thanks for the boilerplate friggin' answer. Like, we want to know, like, how secure our Twitter accounts are not, and what improvements have you made, like, and not just like, oh, we're committed to the security of our
all
users.
That was missing was mistakes were made, and we fired a guy named Kyle.
Yeah, right. That would be more information than we got from Twitter so far.
Exactly.
And they have to testify in front of Congress.
That'll go well.
Right? That'll go swimmingly well.
I always love to see them testify in front of Congress, and they're going, when you call a phone a flip phone, what push any key.
We need to have like a watch party of Security Weekly hosts and listeners and watch the testimony just to see how hilarious.
Yeah,
that
that
is.
would be a good watch party. We could just watch the questions from the Congress, and
right.
I was like, "Is that a communist phone, boy?"
Hey, actually, do you remember that years ago called Mystery Science Theater 3000?
Hold on. Hold on. Tyler and Joff.
One at a time.
Tyler
man.
and Joff.
Joff.
Joff's name is first in the alphabet, so Joff and then Tyler. How about that?
Okay. Anybody remember that show called Mystery Science Theater 3000?
Yes.
So we should do Hacker Congress Theater 3000.
Yes.
Hell yes.
It's crap.
Sold.
Tyler.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Like, I really don't see, if you think about how big and how much code has went into the Twitter deployment in general, just infrastructure or just code. If you take one or both of them, how much could actually get done in the amount of time they've had?
Right.
Yeah, there may be some kind of safeguards as a temporary stopgap, but really, this seems like there's a fundamental issue with the way back-end Twitter is managed and or what access is available. So I don't see that being fixed right away. And that makes me wonder how long it's going to take for that code base on the back end to actually get adjusted.
Right? Like, it's almost like someone had a PHP MyAdmin interface and could just create tweets. Right? Like, that's kind of how I envision it. Which
I see back orifice and Twitter, just that seems like the exact same thing.
Back orifice. I love that's an awesome product. Oh my god, I love that thing. Low fat and the cult of the dead cow.
I tell you what, in reading the book about the CDC, there was this moment that I think is one of the, I don't know if it's pivotal, but like, it's just one of those most amazing moments in
you
hacker.
Say that word again, Paul?
Pivotal. So I fluffed the word, Jeff. Relax. There's this moment in hacker history where CDC takes the stage at DEF CON, and one of the members is wearing the fur with the chaps and the cowboy hat, and there's applause, and I believe it was a talk about a back orifice, right? And there's a clip of it somewhere on the internet.
And they threw raw meat on the crowd. I was there.
It was just one of those like epic moments.
No, I was literally. I was not.
Were you there for that moment?
I was literally there. I was not in the auditorium. We couldn't get in. We got down there, and we were standing in the doorway, and they wouldn't let anybody else in the auditorium. And everybody said that Cult of the Dead Cow is going to come out. They're going to reveal all this stuff. And they came out on the stage, and they had like black plastic trash bags, and they had rotting meat in them, and they threw the rotting meat on the crowd and then left. It was absolutely epic.
Crazy moment.
Was it cow meat?
I don't know. I didn't get it.
That would be beef. It would be beef.
I had an expense account, Jeff. I'm not like you.
Out briskets, we could go ahead and marinate them.
Right.
NSA may not have given you enough money to buy
Throw that on
food.
the smoker immediately. No, wait. Marinate it for 24 hours, then put it on the smoker.
Free meat.
There you go.
Marinate it in the chlorine in the pool.
In any case, I just, my whole take this week on the Twitter thing is like 36 accounts. Apparently, like the ones that weren't verified, they were able to download DMs. But the response is lacking. For me,
and they dumped a whole bunch of stuff. So there was 8 accounts that got they actually
DMs.
downloaded the whole DM. There was 130 total accounts that were compromised, and it was like 45 that were verified accounts.
But look, I encourage the security community that largely knows this to talk to your friends and family that aren't in information security as a living, right? To tell them that like what you put in DMs, it's not. It's called. I think, in Twitter's defense, it's called a direct message, not a private message, for a reason, in that these are Twitter posts that are direct, not private. There is no expectation. I don't, whatever their user license says or whatever, to me, there is no expectation of privacy in a DM. That stuff is not as protected.
You're putting it out there. It's on a billboard.
If you want a higher level of privacy, use Signal.
I tell my kids about email. I'm like,
email's the same way, Joff. You're right.
Electronic,
unless you're PGP encrypting it, right, or using Signal, right, which is a much higher. And I'm not going to say it's perfect, right? Because nothing out there is perfect, let's be frank, but it's a much higher level of security than Facebook Messenger, Twitter direct messages, LinkedIn direct messages. Like we're not designed to be cryptographically sound, right? These are just ways for users to talk to each other. If you want something, again, that has a much higher level of privacy and security, use Signal and use PGP, right?
Well, the other great thing that happened here was that it was verified, and people don't understand. I had several people call me about what does verified actually mean then, and people were assuming that verified meant that every transaction on those accounts was being monitored.
Oh, like my Twitter account is verified, therefore there's some...
It's sacrosanct. I mean,
there's a cryptographic signature that's attached to every message. So
I had a couple people ask me...
you have to verify the identity of the person sending
exactly, but that's what they were assuming. So I had several people ask me, what does it mean when it says verified? And I was like, it doesn't mean anything.
No.
It means that somebody at Twitter at one point in time said this is a verified user, and they have enough followers...
But that's a good point. At one point in time... I verified my identity with Twitter.
But it doesn't.
It's not a constant verification.
It does not validate, and it does not validate what they said or what they tweeted. It just simply means that this account, they theoretically know who this account is, and several
at one point in time.
Yeah, at one point in time, which was a very finite thing, and it's that time has passed, and now if somebody else gets in there, it's over.
Yep. Agreed.
So it was a big deal because. I don't know. They said they didn't. I don't think they collected that much money, though. They said at the last count, I think they had $110,000 worth of Bitcoin was donated.
Which we can debate.
I mean, considering that there's $1 million bounty on, finding and attributing this, that doesn't seem like very much money worth for the risk.
Like they should have. I agree, Tyler. Right? They should have done a bounty, unless they realized that the bounty didn't apply to what they found. Right? Was the scope of the bounty not applicable to them phishing internal user? Theoretically, let's say they phished internal users to get access to that console. Right. Did they realize that was outside the scope of the bounty? And they were like, yeah, maybe we should just do a Bitcoin scam and get a couple 100,000 because we're not going to. And if we tell them through the bounty program and go after the bounty, they're going to know about it and fix it. So let's cash in and just do the Bitcoin scam, right? Like if we all were evil people with no ethics or morals and criminals, right? That's probably the same conclusion we would draw, right?
Yeah, and we can all turn each other in.
Yeah, one of the accounts that got took over, their offering was at Justin Sun, I think it was, my Story 15. They're offering $1 million bounty to figure out whoever did this, which is also interesting.
So maybe there was,
if you confess, do you get the $1 million?
I confessed on your behalf, Jeff.
For the Bitcoin.
Just curious.
Hey, that's a pretty juicy bounty, right?
Yeah,
it is. Agreed, Jeff. Right. Where do we want to go next?
Well, my take on the Twitter hack is I've seen several articles that are, it's the media, it's a slow news, cycle as we've talked about over the last 4 months. And they're talking about, people are really the weakest link. People are always going to cause failure. I would only point out, and I was not going to put up a Twitter article, but I did put one up because it mentioned compliance. And compliance in this context, I think means pay attention to some of the processes and procedures, not just the technology and the automation and what you do from a technical control standpoint to do security. There's more to it than that. I think this might be an example of that.
And then
I think Jeff, there's too many secrets.
Yay, you got it.
Yay.
And your head was kind of obscuring it, and I was just looking at it briefly. But I finally, when you were talking,
C-Tech astronomy.
Go ahead, Johnny.
Yeah, when you were talking, Johnny, if we can, or Goose, if we can cut to that.
Cut to my screen.
Jeff's head was blocking it, and I was only getting kind of flashes of images. But then I saw what it was in a very famous scene from Snickers, of course. Yeah,
of course.
Very nice.
And I'm back blocking it. It just
do Xuanwu.
Huh? Are you speaking Chinese to me, or because you do that sometimes? You do. I don't know. You don't. Did you speak fluent Mandarin or no? Not really. You just know.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Is that in Italian? That would be like mezza-mez. It would be like a little, sort of.
What does Buttafuoco mean in Italian anyway?
I'm gonna throw an article out if you guys don't.
Yeah. We're just,
all right, that's okay. Yeah,
anyway.
you can do that.
So actually had a loyal listener message me on LinkedIn and say, how come you guys haven't talked about this vulnerability yet? It's my article number 2.
The
maybe
C thing.
The C data thing.
Yeah.
Tyler, you seem to have looked at it. Maybe Tyler, you can comment on it because I don't care about vulnerabilities at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's
about compliance.
it's a pretty bad one. It's affecting a lot of the fiber terminals. So you're talking about a lot of ISPs, a lot of endpoint gateways. It essentially there's some backdoor built into a lot of the firmware that has hard-coded credentials, some default creds, and most of those are over either SSH or Telnet, if I remember right. And
Mr. Potato Head,
Mr.
Potato Head,
ISPs.
backdoors are not secrets.
No, they're not.
No, not
and,
these ones.
and Telnet. Why are we talking about Telnet in 20 for fuck's sake?
I say that
if it's okay if you use a high port.
I say that in front of my family, and they just kind of look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, remember war games? Remember when he goes to his friends in the data center? I'm like, that's the line that they use.
I have heard that too, Jeff. I had somebody say to me like once, if you set it above, 15,000, then Telnet's okay. I had somebody say that to me once.
It's just crazy that these are the backbones that a lot of fiber backhauls are running on. So if you're able to gain access to some of these devices, and I'm not familiar with this particular device, having not bought a bunch of Chinese gear recently, but the fact
that's a lie. You buy
backbone, that means you have visibility into things.
Tyler, you buy bunches of Chinese gear all the time. I don't want to hear it.
I saw a shipping container in San Diego that said Tyler on the side of it. Yeah.
Right. It's one of those things. It really is the equivalent of SCADA vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
Sort of to visit us in the infrastructure world, and these optical networking devices. People don't think about it, but there a lot of ISPs that things right will run all out-of-band networks to deal with these interfaces and just don't expose them to the internet. But
John, and it's very telling. We talk about SCADA, right? And the famous quote from War Games, "Backdoors are not secrets," right? It's interesting that a movie that old, whenever War Games came out,
1983.
80 was 83, right? Is telling to what's happening today. So here's some fiber optic devices, here's some SCADA devices, and a lot of this stuff does have backdoors that's built into the firmware. Yeah. And what's interesting is it's not really secret because the developers of the firmware know about it. Those of us that reverse engineer and look for those backdoors, to go to last week's, we know about them as well. So they truly are not secrets, and that's a good thing, right? They were able to identify and discover backdoors in these firmware.
But does that stop the ISPs from buying that? And does that information ever disseminate down to the level of, where these devices are actually used, the infrastructure teams?
Agreed,
people
Tom.
like the ISPs. Like I've reached out to several of our ISPs to ask are you guys using any of these? Because, hey, this is probably pretty bad.
Yep.
The fact that it's across multiple manufacturers, maybe the same manufacturing factory inside of China, but the fact that there's multiple versions of this across multiple manufacturers, that's also a pretty big red flag. Like, what are they using these for? Are these, part of the Great Wall? Is this some kind of thing that's collecting data out of band? Like, all of these things seem really bad.
I think it's starting to trickle down, though. I mean, you're definitely seeing the sort of thoughts about SCADA and the thoughts about all these back systems, which for so long were protected by security through obscurity. I mean, that's the War Games fallacy, is that no one knows how to do this stuff. That's the Doug, nobody knows how to do this but you and Mr. Spock. That was a quote I always said that somebody said to me at a board meeting once. And
Someone said, back up.
no, they did.
Someone said what to you in a board meeting?
They said, "Oh, come on, Doug. Nobody knows about any of this weird, nerdy stuff except you and Mr. Spock." And I was like, Mr. Spock's not real.
Were they talking about the Vulcan pin?
That too.
What do they call? What is that called? The Vulcan?
The Vulcan neck pinch.
Neck pinch.
You went ahead, gave him a neck pinch and knocked his ass out.
That would have fixed him, wouldn't it?
The only thing to one up that
I'll give him the Spocker.
The only thing that one up that would be the force choke. You would just force choke him in the meeting.
Choke yourself. Go ahead. Put your hand.
Well, along those lines,
Who's against that now?
Along those lines, having a somewhat of a cryptographic DoD background, where when I was working for an organization that would have to evaluate and test and approve cryptography systems and make sure that they were going to last 10, 20, 30, 40 years, our presumption was always the adversary has a copy of the device, has all the manuals, has reverse engineered it, knows everything that can possibly be known about the system, and you still got to make sure it's secure.
Yeah,
that was our going in premise of doing evaluations. And yet I came out into the private sector, and it's like, well, we're doing a proprietary algorithm to do our encryption, and nobody can read it and break it because we're not going to tell you what it is. And I'm like, oh, so you're doing ROT 13? Okay, I got you.
Like yeah, and like that's one presumption. Like there is no security in obscurity, right? And I think that the security professionals,
but
we've always
get you
pushed
through
that.
Your compliance assessment.
Yeah, but we've always pushed that. I think if you're in the know in any capacity in information security, you know that if I have this device or I'm making this device, I have to assume exactly what you said, Jeff, that my adversaries have also obtained these manuals, and especially in today with the internet. Like, let's take a walk back in history for a brief moment and just talk about, like, we used to have to go get the manuals, right? Like there was no internet to go download the firmware to reverse engineer it and, go acquire the manuals. Most of that stuff's online. If it's not, someone that may know someone that can get the manuals in the firmware or whatever, right? But even back in the day,
these days have it easy,
right?
That's all we're saying.
Back in the day, I tell my kids this. They're like, "Dad, it doesn't work." I'm like, "What doesn't work?" It's like, "Well, I can't play my game." I'm like, "Yeah, but like, what's the error?" "Oh, I don't know. I just know I can't play my game." I'm like, "You realize that, like, I grew up with computers. There was no internet for me to go look stuff up. And you're not even taking the step to go look stuff up. So you go struggle with that for a half an hour, because that's the rule I was brought up with. You go look that up and you try and figure it out for a half an hour. And then when you can ask the question, then I will help you, right?" And I'm not saying this because I'm being an asshole dad. Right? I'm saying this because it's going to help you get through life, right? But
I want to tell a quick story.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Along those lines, I was doing an assessment. This was several years ago, and my customer said to me, "I want you to look at this particular device," and I'm not going to name the vendor. I'm not going to name the device. He goes, "It makes me nervous. It's listening on TCP port, whatever, several thousand high order." So I connected to this thing, and the interesting thing I noticed immediately after the three-way handshake is it back exactly 32 bytes. So Jeff's ears are ringing right now. I was like, 30 bytes? What the hell is going on? So I started digging, and I reverse engineered the actual source code of the client of this particular device. And as I looked further, I discovered it was using AES in electronic codebook mode. The second block of the 32 bytes, second block of the 16 bytes, should I say, the subsequent 16 at the end, was the rekeying block. And so then it took several days, but within days I had a Python script that could read a TCP dump, capture, and decrypt everything between client and server on this device.
But all those people.
But that comes back to you found on the internet, right? Like before, we had to go ask someone for the manual and have it mailed to us, right? Or beg the manufacturer and use social engineering techniques to go, I need the manual to that, right?
But that's back to the Doug and Spock thing. It was the idea of SCADA people is always, and they still have that today, was that no one has this information, no one can get to these devices, and what they've started doing is they've started adding connectivity to these networks that was not there before.
No one would know how to adjust the speeds or adjust the pressure on valves of centrifuges.
Oh, no, never. They never figured
that
it
are
out.
in use in Iran.
Nah, they never, ever figured that shit out. It's impossible. It can't be
Except
obtained
when they
by
do.
Human beings can even understand it if they saw it. It would just be a bunch of weird mathematicians, and there's only like how many of those in the world?
There was some clip from the 0 Days movie where they talked about how the U.S. obtained the centrifuges that happened to be the same model that were in use in Iran. And this plays into our whole story of attackers are going to find out what you have at any cost, and even more so today than before when we had to like socially engineer the IBM to give me the manuals to AIX or whatever. That's what we wanted to hack, or the PBX system or whatever, right?
So on that note, I am actually still on my way through reading the Countdown to Zero Day book, and if anybody, I just want to double down on this. Paul has already, but this book is phenomenal. It is a great read. It really is.
I think it's really the definitive work on collecting facts about what happened in the whole, not just the Stuxnet attack, but also the political climate surrounding that attack, right? Which is
it's very comprehensive.
Yeah. Agreed. And actually, Johnny, a production engineer, was like, "How did they manipulate the centrifuges?" And I'm like, "Now it's been a couple of months since I finished the book. I'm like, there was something with the valves and something with this. I'm like, read the book. That's the definitive manual for exactly the tactics that were in use."
They literally hijacked and replaced the DLL that was controlling the PLC and broke instructions.
That's what I was explaining to him, is they corrupted the S7 project files, right? That then got instructions that they USB carried over to the PLCs, from my recollection.
Made it
Stuxnet.
Stunning, man. That shit is just, that book is a great read. Look, I would just say right now, every information professional should read that
Must
book.
read.
Yeah, absolutely.
Must read.
And so once
Tyler's
again,
just sitting back like, I wrote some of that code.
Yeah, what do you have to say about that, Tyler?
Tyler, we pick on you because normally you have the Stuxnet poster in the background. That's why we pick on you, for no other reason. We have no other evidence other than you have the Stuxnet poster.
And that's this Xuanwu. So Xuanwu is the bad power thing.
Oh, yes.
It's another.
Is that how you say that? Yeah,
Xuanwu is. I haven't seen the characters, but
Xuanwu would be how you pronounce. Xuanwu Labs demonstrated bad actors could potentially manipulate the power brick into sending more electricity than the phone can handle, because they've power adapters have software in the firmware. Software in them, right?
In the transformer.
It's the two data leads that you can actually to determine the voltage and the amperage that comes across.
Because my whole thing is like, doesn't the phone also have software that can do some checking before it applies the voltage? That was the chicken and egg, right?
The phone does, but they were blowing up the chargers. So it wasn't the phone that was bursting into flames. They were going after the chargers. So they took, it was something like 18 chargers out of 35 from 8 different vendors. They were able to do this attack on, according to the paper they wrote about it. And so it was kind of. It was kind of, to me, a fluffy story, but it was also it was very relevant.
They could send more electricity than the phone could handle, therefore overheating the phone, melting internal components.
If it went that far, but they were blowing up the chargers. So they were these fast chargers. They were causing the fast charger to over rev, essentially, like Stuxnet, and that caused the charger to catch fire.
I thought that the charger piece was lying to the phone about the voltage.
Well, yeah, if it would, some of them did do that. Yeah, they were able to blow up the phone.
Basically, I'm going to send you 2 volts, and the phone was like, yeah, cool, but that's just what I'm telling you. In actuality, I'm sending you 5 volts, and therefore I'm going to melt the phone.
Cook,
right?
And then
but I would think that, much like printers, that there's some fail-safe mechanism in the phone Like, is there something in the phone that actually measures the voltage, or am I just believing what the charger is sending me? That was my question.
Depends on how it's actually measuring the voltage, though. If it's measuring the voltage,
based
then
on what the charger tells
But
it,
if it's just saying, how much voltage are you giving me? And it's going,
Yeah.
I'm giving you exactly what you asked for, but I'm really giving you a whole bunch more.
It's my whole thing of going back to defensible code. Right?
Yeah.
Like, basically making the assumption that a user or other application or device is going to give me false information.
Yes.
And therefore, I need to, in my code, validate that all of that is true, because in developing an application for the past 5 years, I've realized that users in other applications tend to either lie or just not give me the whole truth. Therefore, I want to make my code defensible as possible. Like, hey, I'm going to give you this value. Yeah, but that value is none. So, like, hold on, let me check for that first. And in with the case of voltage, if I know there's a safe operating voltage, every time I apply that, no matter who told me or what told me what the voltage should be, I'm going to check to make sure it's within this range, because that's my safe operating range.
That's the engineering versus security.
Yes.
Engineers assume nobody's doing anything bad. Security people assume everybody's doing everything bad.
So when I write code, I guess when I write code now, and this wasn't something I thought of in the beginning of my career, right? This is something I thought of after doing security and hacking for some time and developing software, that I'm like, I don't believe anyone about anything. I know what my operating parameters are, and I'm going to check for those, and I don't care what anyone tells me otherwise. I'm going to input validation, basically.
I mean, when James Brown says, give me the bridge, he assumed everybody would give him the bridge. They weren't going to give him something else entirely. So just to put this in a totally different context.
True.
Thus actually brings the greater issue to information confession, and that is, we are all slowly descending into paranoid delusions which will lead to insanity.
Looks like I picked the wrong week to
It's why, Joff, like, I check if it's none, and then I also check the length.
Yeah.
On everything that's passed to me. And when you read my code, you're like,
matters, doesn't it, Paul?
Yeah, you're like, this person's paranoid. And I'm like, no, because there's been conditions where, well, it's not none, but it's an empty string. An empty string is not none. An empty string is an empty string. So I have to check for both, right? And I think that's a lot of the kind of parallels in security.
Is it a null or is it a zero?
Or is it a space? Is it a blank? Is it
integers?
And is it an ASCII blank?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
that goes back to.
But Jeff brings up a great point, right?
While, though, right?
Is it like
to adopt that zero trust model, and that goes further than just code. That goes down to trusting cables. Like this is a private talk I gave many years ago around, like, do we trust our Ethernet cables? Our HDMI cables are smart now. There's an entire protocol and chipset there. Are smart. We've seen bad USB and USB Ninja that can now execute code on phones.
Tyler, is that an integer 0 day or a character 0 day?
I'm gonna go with that's a both.
But Jeff brings up a good point, and it does tie into the whole cable thing, right? I have to check for type.
Yep.
I have to check for null or none, which is a type, Joff, right? Technically, none is a type. Is it a type?
It's type. It's the non-object. I mean, when I'm coding defensively in Python, in those conditional statements, I usually have if variable not none, and if something else. Right.
Yes.
Per your statement, right? We have to. It's belt and suspenders, right?
Yes.
That's the way you have to do it. No trust. But then
extrapolate that, Joff, into what Tyler's saying, right? Like, what I'm expecting from a cable, right, could be good data or bad data, right? And that there's both power and data coming from a cable, right? So I have to check the power requirements. I also have to check the data requirements coming from that cable, and realize that most of the time, like historically, when we thought about a physical device sending me something, we're under the assumption that it's not going to lie. However, in modern times, that cable or that device that's attached to the other end of that cable, we have to assume is going to lie to us, which is what we're talking about in this story about power supplies basically lying to us. there's the power aspect,
Yep.
and there's the data aspect. Tyler, to your point, Ethernet, HDMI, totally carrying power and data, right? We have to validate those things as developers. Largely, that's not done. We're just assuming that the data they're sending us over HDMI is completely valid, right? That's not always the case.
How do you validate that as a security person? I mean, take something like the White House, right? Like, are they validating every HDMI cable that goes in there for all the security camera monitoring TVs, or are they validating every charger that comes in or Apple phone cord that comes in? I mean, from my standpoint, I can't even validate my own stuff, much less thinking about that at a nation state level. This is going to become a very big deal. The supply chain attacks are going to be bad.
How your device is interpreting audio versus video coming over HDMI or other mechanism. I fight with my devices. I fight with my devices all the time about where it's going to get audio from and how it's going to interpret that audio. Is it going to interpret it as surround sound or not? I run into bugs all the time. What I hope is bugs and not some attacker in my systems, because sometimes I question that of like, I configured this TV with this device, with this HDMI, with this Sonos system. This is how it's configured. And then like my family goes and mucks with stuff and swears they haven't mucked with stuff. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't, but now it's different. And I'm like, was that a software update? Was that an attacker in one of these systems trying to do something? Like, I question it in the integrity of all of those systems operating together, because it's such a weird thing of data versus power versus audio versus video, which could be in all of these protocols.
Yeah.
Well, this actually reminds me of the entire fallacy around the open source argument as well.
Yeah.
I mean, argument years ago is like, it's open source, which means you as consumer can go and review every line of source code. It's like, okay, that's great, but do you when I go over to talk to Paul Asadorian or John Strand or whomever, is every single person I know an expert in kernel level development? Are you going to review every single line of source code in your Linux kernel before you run it? I mean, seriously.
And then get into, we're talking about audio and video stuff, which we have a lot of experience with. Am I going to evaluate that when it's audio and video over HDMI or over the network, which are completely different standards? And even just outside of security, functionality-wise, the research that I've read about evaluating which standard is best for audio and or video over the network, regardless of security, they're already fighting about what's proprietary, what's open source, and all that stuff, let alone who's evaluating all that for security.
So, not that I don't like open source, don't get me wrong. I like open source because it can be peer-reviewed by communities with the expertise to do so.
Yeah, but
the fallacy saying that's silly. It's just silly. Everybody doesn't have this to do it. The fact that it can be peer-reviewed by a group of equivalently skilled individuals, that's good, but it tends to be, as you get higher and higher in the specializations, that pool of equivalently skilled individuals becomes smaller and smaller. And so...
Yeah, the more complicated and more specific you get, the smaller your talent pool is of individuals who can actually make an accurate assessment of whether something is secure or not.
Exactly.
They're likely very highly paid and highly skilled individuals that are not going to spend their free time for free to do that, right? Like they're employed.
So at some
I would just like to point out.
My take-home point is, at some point, we all have to extend trust. The best as an information security community, in my opinion, is to promote standards that give people assurance across the community that they can believe in, but they don't necessarily have to get educated, because nobody has enough time in their life to get down to reading. Another example? Going to go ahead and dissect microcode in Intel CPU processor. I probably have the skills, believe it or not, to do that. But who has? Honestly, who has the time?
And who has the time? Right. And the incentive. It's also incentive as well.
I would just like to point out that what Joff is saying, and I'm not saying any of us are guilty of it, but we're basically saying cut people a break because nobody's got the time to look at all that stuff. But we say that, but at the same time, we as an industry will very often kind of scoff at the other users, the other developers, the other admins that should have known better to do the basic security and know not to trust that thing that happened or doesn't happen. So it's a slippery slope. If we're gonna cut ourselves slack, well, we're all codependent at some level.
Yeah, but here,
that's why we drink.
This time, and so my story number 18 is why I drink and ties into this conversation, right? Like Cisco has flaws that leak sensitive data. When you go dig into this even a little bit, you get to the line that reads, and I feel like I've read this line hundreds of times, if not thousands in my career. An attacker could exploit this vulnerability by sending a specially crafted HTTP request containing a directory traversal character sequence to the affected device. A successful exploit could allow the attacker to view arbitrary files within the web services on the targeted device. Even if we limit this to embedded systems and or IoT devices, I really truly think the same developer or developers write these HTTP web servers and web apps for network gear and IoT devices and have just reused code for the past 20 or 30 years.
Oh, they do.
Mm-hmm. Right? And no one's ever learned not to defend against directory traversal. Like you can go read OWASP. Like I looked up Veracode, OWASP, and a bunch of other vendors and things that talk about validating user input and input sanitization to protect against directory traversal. So the fix is not magic pixie dust or super complicated, right? It's not. Why can't we make this software that's in these devices defensible against something like directory traversal that's resilient to a specially crafted, air quotes, specially crafted,
you have to do it.
HTTP request.
Somebody has to sit down and do it.
The answer is because nobody cares until something goes wrong or somebody.
But things have gone wrong for the past 20 years.
But not to me.
Yeah,
it happened to you, and your people suck. It's like mine's okay. I didn't get hit, so
gotta think.
Fuck you.
I'm not the only guy. Like Paul just expressed this, I am not the only guy in the info session that when I see the words command injection, SQL injection, specially crafted and direct reversal somewhere in a paragraph, I get that jaded, oh, not again.
Not again. Exploitation of this is really not all that dissimilar to the specially crafted, unsanitized input vulnerabilities we've been exploiting for 20 plus years, right?
Yeah.
Come on.
And when I see the word specially crafted, it also makes me laugh out loud because I'm like, yeah, I bet it's not that special.
Yeah, the special part becomes not special when I reverse engineer the patch to figure out exactly how special it is. I reverse engineer the patch, I look at it and I figure out what that special is, because I can fuzz to get that special, and it's really not that special.
So I never managed 1,000 developers. You were talking earlier, but I managed 8.
Yep.
And when upper management came, just to take the other side and say why this happens, when they came down and they said, not only does this need to be done, marketing promised it would be done by Friday. And people reach out and they grab code that they have that works and they re-embed it and they stick it right back in there. And then we say, oh, we'll in the life cycle, we will eventually get around to testing all this. And we never do.
But my question, and I agree with you, Doug, wholeheartedly, putting my developer hat on, agree with you wholeheartedly. But why can't I reach in and grab a library that deals with this stuff that we know about, that as a developer, I don't have to worry about directory traversal, because I'm going to grab a library that someone's wrote some really smart code that prevents
Because I
against that.
grab one that works that I've already got that's sitting there, and it hasn't happened to me. It may have happened to you.
You're assuming that the developer knows he should be looking for that.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
true, Jeff.
And,
No, it's a great
and that's
point.
not
Yeah.
necessarily their motivation.
I'm just trying to put a green dot on my board by Friday afternoon so I can say this is done. And we had this.
And I don't want to say it's a bad developer because it's not. It's
just a
it's not.
developer.
Right.
I mean, it's just somebody that's sitting there going, oh, my God, I got a bunch of red and yellow dots on my board. I got to get some green dots on my board or I'm going to get fired. This worked. We've had this for 2 years. It's never had a problem. We're using this version, and I don't have time to go out and spend 6 days researching what works and what doesn't work. And here's this other library that may have another whole set of problems, and then I got to test that. This works. We have it. We're using it. It's been approved. Done. I got a green dot. And if 2 years later we get hosed, oh, well, we'll put out a patch. I got to go. Bye.
But the frustrating part for me is that let's pick on a developer or not pick on a developer. We got a developer. That developer could be awesome, right?
Yeah.
They could write awesome code. And they're like, look, I'm going to pull in this library. And they may even know, like, yeah, all the sanitization checks aren't in there. But they write some brilliant code around functionality, right? Like, where's the developer to go, I'm going to write some brilliant code to make this secure, right?
I don't have time
that
for
could
that.
be the same developer. It could be different developers, but they're both brilliant developers.
That doesn't generate no revenue.
That?
You don't make no
together?
revenue off redoing code. You go to your people and say, I got to redo all this code because we're going to make it brilliant. Pfft, they're going to go, yeah, you and Mr. Spock. See you. No, I don't think so.
We're going to make it secure, right?
Reuse the code we have. It's been approved. It's signed off by QA. It was signed off 3 years ago. You want to, and then that's the other piece of it. I got to take all this code back to QA. So I go pull a new library and I say, oh, here's this cool new library. It was written by a brilliant guy. QA goes, oh, yeah, in 6 to 8 weeks, we'll maybe be able to go through that and give you a review. Or you could use the code that's already been approved and be done on Friday and get a green dot. And then I say, all right, green dot, and then the bar.
Is a green dot similar to a check in a box?
Yes.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yes, Jeff.
My board was green, yellow, and red dots. So I had green dots meant the code was finished and we had pushed it. The yellow dots meant it was almost ready to be pushed. It was being reviewed, and the red dots meant we haven't even started this. Oh God! So it was just a quick look at this big board, and it was like.
So you incentivize really insecure code in your dot.
Hell yes, because I wanted goddamn green dots, and I want those goddamn green dots by Friday. And if you don't get them, you're all fired. You stupid sons
Green
of
dots
bitches.
meant functional, not secure.
Hell yes,
Yeah.
because functional was all that mattered because we were engineers. We were not security professionals. We were engineers, and we were protected by the fact that no one could access our code. Our code was in a giant marble building.
Bubble.
No one
Developers
could touch
had
it.
access to the code, no one else.
The only way to get to it was to come in that building past a bunch of guys with rifles, and you couldn't get to it any other way. Until I did a pen test and found out we could dial
Here's where I think that blurring the roles in software development really helps, right? To have people that can help you develop more secure libraries, to blend these reliability, security, and engineering roles and operational roles more into one. And these are things that Google and large companies have done.
Yes.
I want to see that trickle out into other organizations.
That's why you have to have security professionals in the engineering process, or you are screwed. I mean, I'm telling you that right now because we did not have that. You see that constantly. And those security professionals are the people that are sitting there banging their shoes on the table saying, no, you can't just use it because it was already there. And you got to have those people, and they got to have the authority to make that call.
I mean, you have security people that are doing the more traditional roles, but you also have this kind of blending of I'm a developer and ops and security person all in one going, you know what? I'm going to write you a secure library. Like, work on your functional code for a little while that doesn't depend on my library. In the meantime, I'm going to give you a library in your HTTP server.
Yes.
You're just going to call my stuff and it's going to be secure, right?
Yes.
That's the
Wouldn't
point.
that be awesome?
Yes. And that's the point the larger companies are already doing.
You're seeing it, and you're seeing it trickle down.
Speaking of large companies and code, the remote code execution on SharePoint. So even if you do really good code.
Tyler, did you read the full? I didn't. Admittedly, I did not.
Oh, I've been playing with it.
Okay, so there was a fantastic write-up of the person that found this vulnerability. I linked to it in the show notes, wiki.securityweekly.com. It's episode 659.
I think I linked the same one on my 15.
Yeah, what was his name? He deserves credit.
He does deserve credit. It was a really good write-up.
I briefly...
Steven, wasn't it Steven?
Steven something. What's his name?
Yep. At Source Insight, I think is what it was.
Hold on. Steven deserves a full...
Yeah, I'm trying to find the story.
He did a great write-up on how kind of deserialization was happening.
Stephen Seeley. Stephen Seeley deserves his name to be mentioned on the show because ignore the other articles and go read his article, which takes you painstakingly through every single detail on this vulnerability. And props to you, Stephen.
And the problems he ran into. Like, he didn't just lay it out, here's POC code. Like, he made you go through and read through, like, how the data sets were getting corrupted and the gadget wasn't working and how to trigger it.
Right. Like these are the articles that I live for. Like, someone that wrote their experience and went through every single detail. So, yeah.
At the end of the day, like, go patch your SharePoint because, why so serial and a couple commands and a good payload, and it's going to be a bad day for you. So.
Right. Like, I hate to distill it down into that, Tyler, but like essentially I upload an XML file to your SharePoint server and I have is it code execute, basically code execution, right?
It's remote code execution, yeah.
Yep.
Awesome work. Awesome research. My story number 17, Tyler, I'm not sure what number you're.
You refresh them, I got my numbers back on there.
Tyler just doesn't know how to do the wiki.
No, he does. No, he did. Tyler didn't. No, Jeff, I disagree. He did a great job.
He just did it wrong.
Yeah. I won't disagree.
I mean,
any case.
So VPN zero log companies with logs.
Oh yeah, I saw a bunch of these stories, but for whatever reason decided not to cover it. But you did, so let's hear about it. So. And this has been a reoccurring problem, right? I mean, this is why I'm a huge proponent of, like, stand up your own VPN. Yeah. Stand your own VPN because you're control of everything. It is really...
Do you maintain logs of your
not
VPN?
that hard. What is it, WireGuard that's built into Ubuntu 2004?
Yeah.
Like, it's not that hard to set up.
Or even
it really isn't.
OpenVPN. I mean,
OpenVPN, WireGuard, you can totally do it yourself. Yep.
I am a huge fan of WireGuard.
Yeah, great job.
I'm a believer now. That is a great VPN. The fact that it does dynamic on-demand stuff is super, super handy.
We used that, Jeff. We were helping out one of our friends with PCI compliance, and we used WireGuard as the VPN to make sure it wasn't exposed to the internet and do that. And we run it on a Raspberry Pi. Like how awesome is that?
I helped you with the promise of maybe getting some cigars,
which we have boxes now to ship you cardboard cigars. So we're getting cardboard
There's
cigars.
A pallet setting over
we
here,
have
Jeff.
cardboard boxes in which we will put cigars into, and then
I didn't realize the invoice was net 180.
Right? We need to. And then we need to get stamps and postage. And
and there's those state tax stamps for interstate
Ziploc
transport.
bags. Yeah. Anyway, what were we talking about? VPNs. Tyler.
Yeah, VPNs, and how about that the NSO and some awesome mobile malware that has some cool capabilities in it. I love how everybody trusts their phone and trusts mobile networks so much.
I thought mobile malware was just TikTok. Is that?
Yeah, it's just TikTok, right? It couldn't be anything else.
No, that's just for the Chinese government. I mean, we got Facebook for the U.S. government. We've got. I mean, never mind.
I am looking forward to research, quite frankly, on the TikTok front, because what I keep coming back to is applications. Let's use TikTok as an example. It exists in the Apple iOS App Store.
Yep.
It exists in the Google Android store, right? App Store,
Play Store,
which means it's in compliance with their respective policies. Now, their policies may differ. They both have expansive resources to detect applications that fall outside of their policies. TikTok today can be downloaded from both of their stores.
Let me tell you a story about that.
Yes, please do.
If I may. Sorry, Todd. I mean, it was back when I was still doing QSA work, so it was prior to going to Tenable. So this is early
this is probably 2011, 2012. I had a customer that was trying to put together a PCI compliant mobile payment app type of thing, and they wanted to put it through the Apple Store. And so we were dealing with the company that was writing the app, but we were also dealing with Apple. And, as I said earlier, the premise for evaluating cryptographic secure systems was everything and you make it secure anyway. So, I'm talking to the company, and they're describing that, they got to go through all sorts of rigorous security hoops, let's say, because Apple requires it.
Right.
I'm like, okay, that's cool. Let's talk to Apple. And so we got on the phone with representatives from Apple, and they're like, oh yeah, we have very strict controls over what goes on the Apple Play Store. We put everything through it. And I'm like, okay, so what you're saying is you're Apple. I should just trust you that it's cryptographically secure, that it's secure, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, the DoD part of me is like, bullshit, show me what you got. And they were one they were one company in particular that said, well, what we do is very proprietary. We don't like to share. And this was Apple saying, well, we don't like to share. That's not surprising. The criteria that we
that's Apple's response to everything. Yeah. What we do is awesome and secure and proprietary. We're not going to show you.
It might be the most secure thing in the world, but if you're confident with it, show it to me.
Right.
Share with me what you got. And if you don't, I immediately think, bullshit, it's not secure.
Yeah, agreed. Also, along those lines, Apple is offering hackable iPhones to security researchers. I mean, my comment is like, don't get too excited, because basically, if you're looking to look for iOS vulnerabilities, these phones, you may get shell access with the possibility to run tools, I assume debugging tools. The caveat is these iPhones are meant for use in controlled setting. They are the property of Apple. Mm-hmm. You don't actually own them. I'll get to that.
Walk around with it.
They offered a 12-month renewable basis to participating researchers, and they must remain on premises of the program participants at all times. So my comment is, so you don't own it, but you can own it.
Well, sort of.
I make myself laugh with my own jokes sometimes because I think that's just really funny.
It's like, how fast can you violate the user agreement? It's like,
well, that's the other thing. Like, we're going to phone the hackers, and they're not going to own it, but they're gonna own it. But they
never break the rules.
They never break the rules and own it. No. How do they know?
I'm really curious to see what telemetry data is going back. Because at the end of the day, I'm more interested in what they're actually collecting from these phones as opposed to the regular ones.
Like, Tyler, if I can own it, can I prevent the telemetry to see if it leaves the premises or not? Right?
And is that what they're really testing?
Right? But are they testing researchers or are they testing them, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that was my first thought. Maybe they're looking for the methodologies and the techniques and the order of the techniques and things that you try. Maybe they're trying to, to fingerprint some activity.
Like volunteer to be a lab rat.
But my whole thing is, like, I just want one of these phones so I can change my default SMS text messaging app on iOS. Like, that's why I want to hack dive. That's why one of the reasons why I use Android. Like, I hate the controls they put in place, right?
Yeah.
I want to use Signal as my text messaging app. In iOS, you still can't do that.
You can't do that in iOS.
You got to remember that Google owns you when you're using an Android.
Oh yeah, somebody always owns
surveillance. And to quote another book I'm reading, surveillance is a really big deal. It's happening all around us. Has been for some time. Another great book read is
what is that one, Jeff?
The Age of Surveillance Capitalism.
The Age
is
of Surveillance. I got it.
Excellent read. Now, Derek Banks, I can't take credit for this. Derek Banks at Black Hills suggested this one to me. The author is somebody called Shoshana Zuboff.
Yep, got it.
It is...
Buy now with one credit.
I'm listening to this one as an audiobook, but it will open your eyes as to what is happening and has been happening in the last decade, particularly in the world of Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, the competition for dispossessing you of your personal data.
The fight for a human future at the new frontier of power.
So along those lines, I've got a customer right now that I'm doing a PCI assessment. They have an e-commerce application that supposedly that they outsource completely. So they're
Jeff,
like,
is that Jeffrey Dahmer in the background? What is,
that's
what is
me.
With some
It's
fava
Jeff-
beans
that's
and a nice
me.
Chianti.
Oh, a
It's
different
Jeff,
Jeff.
all right. I don't
Different
know that
Jeff.
it's Dahmer.
That's old Jeff, or that's young
me.
Jeff.
That's me in high school. Yeah, that's young Jeff.
It rubs the
But,
lotion on its skin.
Yeah, I have this
Excellent.
customer.
And you know they had
that
cameras back then.
It was a
Well,
pterodactyl
you see, it
in
was
a box.
black and white. It was a Daguerre type.
I wasn't
There
sure
you
if it was
go.
a painting or not, Jeff.
It's Jeff in the Civil War.
You
So
can't even
anyway.
get a word in.
I have
Come
this
home,
customer
English.
that supposedly has an e-commerce site that's completely outsourced, so they have very minimal PCI responsibilities. So I'm looking at their website and I'm looking at the page source code just to see, okay, when does their website go from their website over to like a payment, processor like a Stripe or something like that that's doing the actual payment processing. And I'm looking through the, I haven't done pen testing in many years, so I'm a lamer. So I'm
Since
just
the
looking
Civil
at
War, apparently.
since the Civil War, and I'm just looking at I'm clicking on view the page source, and I'm scrolling through all their website. And, it's a merchant site, and there's all these links to Twitter, Google, Facebook. I'm like, holy shit! What kind of information are they capturing for all these different groups? I was just amazed. So all that to say is, everybody knows everything about us, and there's no stopping them.
Oh, I agree. One of the things that was brought up recently, in a couple of ways I can go with that based on that last statement, Jeff, right? Like, one is like the amount of JavaScript that we include in our websites. Like, oh, I want like a pretty XYZ thing on my website, so I'm just going to include this JavaScript from this other website. That makes me super nervous. The other thing of like when I talk to non-hacker information security people, they're like, yeah, I was talking to my significant other about XYZ, and then when I went to Facebook and or Amazon or whatever, I was presented with ads for XYZ, but I never searched for that in a browser. I only spoke that verbally.
Right.
Is that a who's doing research on that? Like, what are we not calling people out? Tyler, you're nodding your head. I know this is probably in your wheelhouse. What
Your phone is listening to you.
our devices are listening, right? Is there a way to turn that
Absolutely.
off? Is the first question.
No.
No.
Probably
As
not
part of
without
the
jailbreaking.
as part of a lot of these like app EULAs and or your condition of having a user account, that access to a certain extent is how they make their money, and
that's
thus
on
is
Tyler. Sorry, that's on the phone, or is that a Google Home or
All of the above.
Amazon
All of the above. That's a
device,
service.
or all of the
All
above?
of the above.
All of the above.
Every user agreement's basically saying you put this device in, they get to listen to you, they get to collect data about you. Have a nice day. And they get to sell it.
That's scary. There's no way
there's
to
a ton of
block that.
research
Like, what
around
if I want that
Alexa
device and I don't want them to do
No,
that?
it's the price of admission. If you want to use the app, if you want to install the app, you got to click through and say,
You're going off the grid, man.
That's how they subsidize the product.
You're going to have to live in a
that's
bunker. There's no other choice.
I mean, I get it. Like, if I type stuff into my browser, right? Like, I'm not verbally speaking it. I've looked for all kinds of stuff. Like, I've been into, because Dave Kennedy is my hero, and he's like, I'm doing all this stuff on smoking meat. I'm like, I have a smoker. Now I have 2 smokers. And now all my Facebook ads are like
Meat smoking.
all about like stuff about smoking meat and stuff. I'm like, all right, that's like, I get that because I haven't put any controls in place to say like what I search for.
Searching for a
but
lot
like
of meat.
what we verbally speak in front of
It's
our
listening.
phones or our devices, to me that's different from what I'm searching on. As a consumer, from a privacy standpoint, I want to be able to separate the two. I want to be able to say, like, what I speak off limits.
As a consumer, Paul, the general consumer wants the deals, wants the coupons, wants the ads, wants to get directed right to what they want to buy.
I guess I know. I guess
you're
I
not
agree,
the
Jeff.
typical consumer.
I agree. I think it's a utopian thing, but like I, as a consumer, in the sense, all right, me, Paul, I want the choice.
Informed consumer.
Let's say outside of a consumer, me, Paul, I want the choice to say, like, what I speak is off limits. What I plug into and type on a keyboard on my phone or on my computer is on limits.
Good luck with that.
Right? Like, good luck with that. That's my beef.
It's in the small print.
That boundary's been crossed.
You have a choice.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah,
what you're
there's been
boundary's not
several
only being
leaks of
crossed.
that
Hold on,
information, like, what's in there.
wait. Tyler, and then Joff.
I mean, there's been several leaks of the always-on listening and the ability for us to, even after you flick the hardware switch, like recently the hardware switch actually works, but there's been prior case to where that hardware switch doesn't work or it's always listening, and some of those audio files have, those servers have been compromised before.
Yep.
And we've seen cases of all kinds of conversations. So who has access to that data, and is that data being sold? Obviously, they're using it for their own analytics as part of their advertising, but I think that's a small piece of their revenue stream or business model. I think selling that data to other people would seem like a much bigger, revenue avenue.
Joff?
The device in your pocket is nothing but a recording device to dispossess you of every piece of data it can possibly acquire.
Yes. 100% agree.
So you have to turn your devices off. Or, can we egress filter so it doesn't?
Even then, you probably can't because it won't work.
Yeah.
If you actually care to buy it for a period, get yourself an RF shielding bag and drop the damn thing in there.
Agreed, Joff. Yep.
After turning it off.
I'm
gonna go completely old school, but it's possible. It's possible you can leave your phone like on your desk and walk away from it and go somewhere.
Alexa will pick you up in the other room. It's okay.
I get the shakes.
No,
I don't have Alexa. I don't have Google Home.
But it's Alexa
talk.
and Google Home are doing the exact same things.
Who will
basically.
turn my lights on if I don't have
putting
it?
a microphone for them to dispossess you of more of your data.
But Doug brings up a great point. They make available a feature so that I can turn my lights off, so I keep those devices on, only so they can collect that data so they can monetize it.
I'll get killed if I don't have it because I have to be able to say, Alicia, path, so I can walk to my office, and the lights will be not on, and I don't know how to turn them on anymore.
My kids do. The shining use
you're
case
all
is
complicit. You've already bought off.
I'm afraid of the dark. When I was a kid, I was afraid of the dark. My kids are afraid of the dark. But
I love the dark.
All of these smart devices, my kids are like, whatever smart device. Turn basement lights on.
I'm not afraid of the dark. I'm just lazy.
There's that too.
I love walking out my door and going, Alicia, path, and all my lights come on to walk to my office, and I don't have to do anything. I don't have to reach over and turn those switches, and I just,
secretly, you're still afraid of the dark. But also, like temperature too. Like, I could go to the thermostat, or I could just issue a voice command to adjust the temperature.
Yeah. I'm hot. Fix it.
Like,
right?
Outside of that, though, like, even if you guys shut your phones off, right? Like, you have people within your vicinity that are not going to shut their phones off. And these things are smart enough to know vicinities, know areas.
Yeah. These things, Tyler, these things are children that are our children that, damn it, got our hacker gene that are like, oh, like Dad gave me a new phone, but I took the old phone, and I don't think he's monitoring the old phone, so therefore I'm going to put TikTok on it and all this other crap that I know Dad doesn't want us to have.
My daughter's phone knows
that totally happened, and the only reason you know that it happens, you can put all the technology you want in the world, but what's interesting is it all comes down to social interaction and social engineering, because you talk to your so this is my oldest child. So you talk to your middle child, and I'm like, it's like, oldest child, I'm like, he's on TikTok, huh? He's like, yeah, Dad, he has his old phone, and he's on TikTok on that stuff, right? Like sometimes it comes down to like totally not technology, like just social interaction and engineering, because the younger kids will rat out the older kids, and you totally prey upon that, which is just horrible.
The message that I'm getting, and we should probably wrap on this.
Yeah,
I agree.
It's getting late. Is if you really want to be secure, don't have children.
Yeah. Oh, totally agree with that, Jeff. Totally agree with that.
But actually, more to the point, today, literally in the corporate competitive mode of racing towards Skynet. I mean, we literally are right there.
I, for one, welcome our new overlords.
I mean, you think I'm joking. Read this book.
I don't think you're joking. No. I think you're exactly spot on.
I do want to cover a couple stories before we end today. My story number 13, 8 cybersecurity themes to expect at Black Hat USA. This list was largely uneventful for me and for many of our listeners until you get to the last one. And it's not an article, it's a slideshow, which I effing hate. But get to the last one. Pablo Artuso and Yvonne Janur of Anapsys, very close friends of Security Weekly, they will dig into another piece of research around the SAP ecosystem, which is they're talking about the solution manager. I think one of the pieces to pull from, and we interviewed the general manager from Black Hat on Enterprise Security Weekly this week, Steve Wiley. Great interview if you want to know what's going to happen, because Black Hat's a virtual event. We talk about that, and of course we're going. They're talking about election security and all of the other themes that you would expect for Black Hat to cover. The one that was a highlight for me in this article was the security of ERP systems, which is something we don't always talk about. It was the last one in the slideshow. Make sure you attend that Black Hat talk, and not just because Onapsis has been a sponsor in the past, and we got close ties to that company.
If you're using SAP or any other ERP,
I'm telling you, we cover obviously all things in security. You need to watch that talk, and not just the shiny, No,
you need to watch this talk. If you're using ERP, you need to watch this talk. I assure you.
Right? Ubiquity. I love the register. Sometimes headlines are very sensational, and this time I like their headline a lot. They said, Ubiquity, go right in the board 100 times. I must validate input data before using it, which is just funny. Basically, they took in IDS, IPS rules from Suricata and didn't validate the validity of them, and basically made your rules 0. So basically invalidated all of your IDS, IPS rules in the platform. Tyler, you and I are both very, very huge fans of Ubiquity. I have been for a very, very long time. And it can happen to the best. My title for this was, when security monitoring goes silent, you need to detect that condition. Because even an upstanding company like Ubiquity makes mistakes, like every other company out there. It can make mistakes. Thieves are also emptying ATMs in a new form of jackpotting. This does require physical access to the ATM, which is very different from the very famous Barnaby Jack. God rest his soul. Did awesome research on that, but this does require physical access to ATMs.
But it is just sitting out there.
If you haven't read about the fugitive in the Wirecard. Wirecard was a payment company in Germany. Cybersecurity related, but more so, we really think that Jan Maraselik, basically walked off with $2 billion. Was it $2 billion?
$2 billion, I think.
$2 billion.
Some crazy amount of money. Yeah.
Is basically touted as the world's most wanted person today. One of the things that Maraselik did was pose as the state of Grenada to go to hacking team to buy spyware tools, and the OPSEC was he registered stateofgrenada.org that tied back to it's not Jan. You would pronounce it Jan?
It's Jan.
Jan.
Yeah.
Jan
Marsalek.
Marsalek, right, was the name he registered those domain names. So, like, very, very poor OPSEC. And just, I think, a really entertaining read, to say the least.
And it's a lot funnier if you read it in German.
Probably. I don't speak German, so I can't say.
Because Germans are known for their sense of humor.
It's where all humor originated.
The Meow attack, which replaces all of the database records with references to cats and meowing, which just caught my attention, because why wouldn't it catch anyone's attention? They're touting this attack as just for fun. That in most of the cases, malicious actors behind these attacks did it just for fun because, well, they can, and because it's a simple thing to do. I don't know if that was really the motivation, but a throwback to hacks for really just for fun, I guess. Also, another chapter in the Iranians attacking Israelis, which have cautioned Iranians, like, don't do that, because it's just going to end badly for you Iranians when you attack Israeli, especially in the cyber realm. But they haven't learned their lesson, and they're not listening to Security Weekly and heeding our warning, because there were cellular devices that were connected to PLCs that were vulnerable to attack, that, according to inside sources from securityweek.com, were attacking these cellular devices and then gaining access to PLCs and not leveraging vulnerabilities on the PLCs, but issuing legitimate commands. Fortunately for the great Israeli people, and we have so many friends from the fine country of Israel, of course, very famous in our startup and cybersecurity realm, right? Fortunately for the Israelis, these were very small facilities and isolated incidents. However, my personal opinion on the response to this is, like, Israelis, like, they're gonna mess your shit up in Iran for doing this, even though it was isolated. Like, don't do that. Like,
we're gonna try to get a version of Security Weekly in Farsi out real soon. So,
like, dude, that's just, it's not gonna end. Anyway, so there's information about that we covered. Also, SMB. There was a really... I'd love to get Geoff, Tyler, your take on this one. There was a Python script released for information gathering on SMB v1 and v2. And I tell you what, like, if you've ever looked at code that, one, does raw packet, like TCP/IP construction, it's not for the faint of heart. Number two, if you're doing raw TCP/IP reconstruction in C or Python, and it has to do with SMB protocol, like, again, I want to gouge my eyes out with forks. Fortunately, someone produced some code that does that for you, which is really awesome and does information gathering. Geoff, Tyler, have you guys seen this or used tools to do SMB information gathering? I'm glad someone else wrote the code, because I hate writing code like that. It's just painstaking.
Yeah, buffer.
Right,
it's
Geoff?
funny. I actually love writing code like this, and I just read the script. I've absorbed it literally by skim reading it, and it's well done. I can already tell.
Oh, good. Yeah, so it's a great contribution, right?
You can do that because there's not many comments in the code.
Yeah, but Geoff, like, this is not like easy code to write. This is like
low level,
tough stuff, low level stuff, right?
Right, you're going byte by byte, looking at offsets, and maybe in many cases looking at individual fields and masking and looking for individual bit meanings, and it's painstaking work. But, you know, guess what, folks? That's how the interwebs actually run.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I thought that was a great little tidbit of code to help us assess systems.
Someone read a lot of RFCs. That's what it was. Just like Corey's tool. I see him just reading RFCs all day.
But to Tyler's point, it's less like but it's not so much the logic in the coding. It's what Tyler said, right? It's I read the RFC, and it's more interpreting how I should construct the packet versus the logic behind, like, actually sending the packet. And that's what's, like, painstaking to me is I like figuring out the logic. less so figuring out like most of the work behind this code was interpreting the RFC, how it can construct the packet to get the data that I want. So props to whoever it was
this
that wrote
actually
this.
reminds me, if you want a really good exercise as a Python programmer, just go ahead and start writing a packet sniffer. And you get a week or two into it, and you'll be like, oh my God, I want to gouge my eyeballs out. There is so much to interpret.
But it is, and Joff, to your point, my shining example, like I wrote a port scanner that like grabbed the banner off the ports, and not because it was unique, but it was a valuable experience, right? Like you should embark on some of these journeys.
That's how you learn how to code, though.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
Take something like that and set that as a challenge to yourself and learn how to code that. Because when you do those things, that's where you start exploring all the questions that really dive into the hacking mentality. You know, what's a big Indian versus a little Indian, and how do you actually pull all these bytes in and analyze them? And that will actually really expand your skill base like crazy if you start doing that kind of stuff.
On the complete opposite of what
you should not pick on short Indians. That is not nice.
I have never once done that.
You can't discriminate between big Indian and little Indian.
No, they're equals.
They're big Indians, opposite but equal.
They're opposite but equal.
Yeah. Gunter Allman wrote an article called Security Posture Fatigue. And I tell you what, scratch the surface, right? I want to know more. Like the gist of the article was there's a lot to be learned from cloud security posture management and apply that to the posture management of your business risk and your enterprise workloads. Like, you got to kind of unravel this article. I love Gunter. It's awesome, and I've read articles from him for the past 15 years in the covering, doing the show. But I think that if we can look at the way we do that posture management in the cloud, basically what he's saying is take that to how you manage your posture management for your enterprise and draw some parallels to that. My comment was, awesome concept. I want to know more. Yeah. Right? Like I want to know some of the details as to how we can actually do that. Right?
It's a jumping off point.
Yeah. Good jumping off point. So last article, automate bug bounties with WFuzz. Basically, my take on this, very basic overview. I want to see how we can not automate that for bug bounties, but automate that in our CI/CD SDLC pipeline, so I don't have to pay out big bug bounties. Like, basically, that was my whole take on that. Like, do that before I have a bug bounty or before I publish the code that's going to go out to a bug bounty is where I would apply this technique.
That's a cost valuation, though. I mean, people look at that and go, is it worth it? Would it be cheaper just to pay the bug bounty?
Also, a really fun, and it's fun with PowerShell and payload execution evasion was the COM object one that I referenced, Joff, that you said you looked at, right? Enumerating COM objects in Windows with COM and DCOM. And this is not new, right? Like, how new is this? Not new.
No, it's not actually new per se. It's been around for a while. There's been quite a lot of research on COM objects and DCOM and how to, use the class IDs out of various DLLs to do pivoting action. It's a great technique though, because it does get us out of the world of using things like WI and service creation with the PS exec technique for lateral movement, which is definitely a good thing to get away from, because good shops that are instrumenting things well, certainly on the PS exec side, you see it as event ID 7045 in your event logs on a regular user workstation. That's a dead giveaway that somebody's remotely starting a service, has probably remotely logged in and started that service, right?
To me, COM and especially DCOM was like APIs before APIs were like a thing that ran most of the web, essentially, right? Yeah.
Well, that's right. DCOM way back, right? This is the way Windows was actually able to do distributed object communication. I mean, if anybody knows about the real in Windows, and I've done some training and reading on this over time, the kernel of Windows is an object-oriented based system. And this is the way it was written, right? Distributed a way of distributing those objects across the network.
Yep.
And it's very much relevant and intrinsic to the way the operating system works. So to explore that area is really important as InfoSec people, because the underlying DCOM technology has not gone away just because Windows 10 has a nice new and I don't know, what do they call those, Metro apps or whatever? Sorry, I'm sounding old, but
is it called? It's not Metro apps. You just made that up.
Oh, yeah, I did. I just totally pulled that out of my rear end. But whatever they're branding the apps, that was probably the 5-year-old branding. But under the hood, there's still a lot of common.
It's DCOM, right?
Yeah. Ultimately, yeah.
Right. Awesome.
All right.
Well, thank you everyone for listening and watching to this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. Doug, take us out.
Well, you know who you are and you know where you are, and that's all there is here. So thanks a lot, and we'll see you next time.